Greetings, this is Lama Tantrapa. Welcome to the webinar dedicated to overcoming the most common problems that people have with the practice of Qigong in general and Qi Dao in particular. We will cover some interesting topics today that many Qigong practitioners only wish somebody would cover for them, because these topics literally empower you to practice much more consistently, provide you much more motivation for your practice, and also provide you some secrets of the trade, some the special tricks of the trade, as it were, that you will be able to apply to your practice so that it becomes more effective and more enjoyable. Now, before we start on the subject matter of our webinar, I just want to thank you for taking your time to study with me and also to attend this particular event, because obviously you are a busy person and I'm a busy person. So we literally have to carve out special time in our day to dedicate to this particular event and to our practice in general. Now, those people who don't carve out any time obviously miss out on a lot of practicing opportunities. And also those people who didn't carve out the time today to attend this event will miss out on some interesting opportunities that we'll be exploring today, and also the offer that I'm going to make to you. Of course, if you are watching this webinar as a recording, you still will be able to take advantage of it as long as you do that by the end of this month, the month of May 2015. So, before I talk to you about that opportunity, let me ask you, do you experience any challenges with either starting or maintaining momentum in your practice of Qigong, Qi Dao, or any other internal arts? I would imagine that you have some challenges, or perhaps experienced some setbacks that made your practice either less effective or less enjoyable, or perhaps just robbed you of the opportunities to practice because you didn't have time or space to do it. Now, based on coaching over 1,000 people at Academy of Qi Dao over the last 15 years, I can say that the number one issue that most people experience with the practice of Qi Dao is time. That's right, the lack of time. The reason why people don't benefit from the practice is because they don't carve out time to actually practice in their day. Now, what is the root cause of this issue? Well, obviously, we only have so much time in our day, and many of us are really busy with a lot of obligations, jobs, or other things that we need to do in our lives. So we have to really prioritize this time. And when we do that effectively, we create the special sacred time when we can practice. However, I also receive questions about this sacred time. People often say, well, if I can't dedicate an hour to this sacred practice, or I don't even have a half an hour to practice on a daily basis, is it better not to practice than to just screw around for a few minutes? To me, of course, anything is better than nothing. So let me encourage and motivate you to start practicing even in small increments. It's actually sometimes even more effective, because when you practice in relatively small increments, obviously not too small, not just a matter of a few seconds, but perhaps a few minutes at a time, 5 to 7 to 10 minutes at a time, you will notice how you create a smooth transition between your daily life and your energy art practice. when you transition back and forth several times a day, what happens? You learn how to make this transition even smoother. So much so that the state of consciousness required for your energy practice, often referred to as Qigong state, becomes not an isolated event that you experience once you really are in the flow and you really hit the most amazing chord that resonates with the entire being. No, it is becoming more and more common practice. And we don't want it to be commonplace in terms of not appreciating it or not feeling like this is a special time and special opportunity for us to feel the flow. But at the same time, we don't want it to be separated by a big gap from our daily life. Why? Because it allows us to infuse our daily life with this energy state called Qigong state. My definition of Qigong state is that it's a state of consciousness that allows you to perceive the flow of Qi and to be in the flow. Any Qigong practice that is worth its salt ideally would be done in Qigong state. As a matter of fact, it doesn't have to be Qigong practice. It can be yoga practice, it can be the practice of martial arts, it can be singing or dancing, it can be even things that you don't consider an energy practice. For example, you can be playing sports, or you can go for a run, or you can talk to people, or do business. Eventually, Qigong state permeates your entire daily life. When that happens, you no longer separate the state of consciousness associated with the practice of Qigong from the state of consciousness associated with living the rest of your life. Now, the reason why many enthusiasts never even start practicing is because they're afraid that they will not do it right. They are familiar with certain dangers of doing Qigong in a way that it's inappropriate or perhaps dangerous, and they don't want to mess with it. Now, there is definitely a significant power to Qigong practices, but also I want to assure you that the majority of basic practices, the ones that you are familiar with, for example, from reading and watching and listening to the materials in the basic Qi Dao practitioner, the Qi Dao home study course, are too benign to really mess anything up. And of course, I also use the fail-safe approach. What's the fail-safe approach to the practice of Qigong? It's associated with a different attitude towards the practice in general. Most people, when they think of Qigong practice, they immediately have in their mind some idea about doing forms. But the thing about it, the practice of Qigong, is that it's really not about doing forms. It's about feeling the flow of Qi and learning how to be in the flow. So instead of doing some forms that by definition you can do right or you can do wrong, you are learning how to feel the flow of Qi and develop understanding and appreciation of certain principles of energy awareness, body awareness, kinesthetic awareness. All of these practices and principles are the subject to test. So what we do is then we start testing these practices and these principles. How do we test them? Ideally, you would have a practice partner who would help you with testing and also would be a fun person to practice with. It doesn't mean that your practice partner needs to be more advanced than you are, and also doesn't mean that you have to be more advanced. What matters is that both of you are curious enough to start exploring together. And when you have a buddy or a friend who's helping you explore something, what happens? You create momentum. it creates certain enthusiasm. Both of you can keep each other accountable as to whether or not you are applying these principles that you just explored to your daily lives. You can also keep each other motivated just by simply asking, so how is it coming along? How is this practice going? Or would you like to test this with me? So in other words, it will create a sense of camaraderie that is crucial and also often missing in the studies of energy arts, because often they're lonesome pursuits. Now, I don't want it to be a lonesome pursuit for you. I want it to be fun and engaging experience. How do you do this? How do you make it fun and engaging? By inviting somebody to practice with you. You literally ask some friend, or perhaps your partner, or perhaps your child, or your parent, or a neighbor, or a friend who you study some other arts with. Would you like to practice with me? I own the materials. I have the home study course, and I'll be happy to share these materials with you. Now, this is something obviously that I would have to grant you permission to share, but I'm sure that people have been doing this on their own accord. So here it is. I am granting you the permission. As a matter of fact, I implore you to share the materials from the home study course that you have. Because when you share, you also get back a great deal. Why? It's karma. You offer something to another person, you create a massive goodwill. That person can benefit from learning whatever they can learn from the study of the materials that you're sharing. And also, they will reciprocate by engaging you in more comprehensive testing and more consistent study together. When you study together with another person, it makes it more fun. It is more motivating, and also it's more effective, because when you have another person to do the testing with, what happens? Your testing becomes more objective. This is number 2 most frequently most common challenge that people experience in their study of Qigong, Tai Chi, and related disciplines. It's the challenge associated with not knowing for certain whether or not they're doing the right techniques, or their forms are correct, or whether or not they're going to mess something up in their energy or in their body. Now, as I already mentioned, we have a foolproof approach to this. We test principles rather than be concerned with doing the forms right. But there is also another thing that comes hand in hand with this particular approach, and that goes a long ways to boost your authenticity. Why? Because you constantly remember when you test that what works for one person doesn't necessarily work exact same way for another person. Yes, of course, I trust the principles that I teach. They have worked for many, many generations of practitioners who became masters in Qi Dao and related disciplines. However, I also don't want to assume that these principles work in the exact same way for everyone. And I don't want you to assume it either. So I invite you to constantly check how this works. And I'm going to give you an example of a couple of principles so that you really make it your practice, authentic and genuine practice. In order to develop clarity and commitment to your studies of Qigong and Qi Dao in particular, these are most essential steps. Step number 1 is to recognize that it's not about good techniques, bad techniques, right or wrong ways, the way you do forms. It's about recognition that everything is relative. And so what you resonate with may not be the same with what other people resonate with. And what you resonate with today may not be the same with what you resonated with yesterday, or what you will resonate with in the future, tomorrow, the day after. As a matter of fact, you probably experienced certain things in your life that didn't resonate with you, although other people raved about them. For example, music. Many people like certain types of music or certain particular pieces of music that others can't stand. Now, instead of just criticizing other people's tastes or the approaches, what we do is we test what resonates with us. And that's exactly what I invite you to do. So instead of considering that other people do something wrong, we simply test what works for us. And that's exactly what we're going to do in a moment, when I just get up and demonstrate a simple and elegant principle called the principle of orientation. What is the principle of orientation? It's all about developing awareness of your center line, and how the center line, which is like a power line in your body, empowers your hands, tools, even your lower extremities. For example, if you have a tool in your hand, let's say a hammer, and you want to hammer a nail, where would you have more power? Over here, or here, or here? If you keep facing in the exact same direction, but your hand is at different angles in relation to the center line, the results are not going to be the same. And I'm not going to tell you that it always works for everyone absolutely perfectly here. But I've tested enough to know that this is how it works for me. And I invite you to test it for yourself. You can do it by yourself, or you can do it with a practice partner. If you do it by yourself, obviously you can just use a hammer or another tool and just simply check how many times it might take you to hammer a nail, to hit the nail, to hammer it all the way down, for example. Or you can use a screwdriver and check what's easier for you, to drive a tight screw on your center line, like so, or slightly off the center line, either this way or perhaps that way. Now, this is something that will transform your understanding of the way the body works in terms of energy alignments. If you consider that the center line is like a projection of your dantian directly forward, everything that happens on the center line receives maximum attention. And as we know, where attention goes, energy flows. So you will empower everything that you do with your hand on your center line, because you provide maximum attention and therefore maximum energy to your hand. Now, if you move your hand just slightly off, whether you're using a hammer or a screwdriver, or you're just pushing, this is exactly what you can do with your practice partner. You can just test how easy it is to push each other, of course, taking turns. So one person needs to brace himself or herself, and the other person will push either on the center line or off center line. Try on both sides of the center line to see how it works. You can also try further away from center line, either this way or that way, so you really get the idea. You really develop an authentic awareness of how it works. And once you reinvent the wheel, as it were, you'll never forget how it works, because you are the inventor. You will know very precisely where your hand needs to be in relation to your center line. But guess what? I already mentioned that everything is relative. So alignment of the hand with the center line can be accomplished by bringing the hand to the center line. But guess what? The nail is not always going to be located on the center line. Or if you drive a screw into a wall, for instance, it's not always going to be on the center line. What to do? Well, that's orientation. That's why we call this the principle of orientation. You orient yourself towards the subject of your attention. So the object of your attention, the screw or a nail or anything else. For example, if you want to have more attention given to your hand, let's say if you're painting, guess what is going to help most? Orienting yourself towards your hand, towards that particular part of the painting where you are painting at the moment. This also means that you will be moving your body in relation to your painting, which is developing harmonious cultural movement. Your painting gestures are not going to be isolated motions of the hand while your torso is static. Instead, your whole body is going to be involved in the painting, whatever you're painting, even though these are perhaps microscopic movements. These don't have to be very large movements. Your whole body being involved in your action will empower your hand and integrate your whole being into your movement. It doesn't always have to be a painting. Obviously, it can be anything. For example, I work with a lot of healers. And for example, if you have a person on a massage table in front of you, well, you're not going to drag the massage table to position it on the center line so that you would have power in the hand. No, you will actually move yourself to orient yourself towards that particular part of the client's body that needs attention the most at this particular moment. And then you will reorient yourself towards other parts of the body of the person you're working with as the need arises. So what happens then is you begin to dance around the massage table, constantly maintaining awareness of your orientation of the center line with the part of the body that needs the healing. Now, if you, for example, work with, let's say, customer service capacity, do you think that you will provide better customer service if you focus your center line on the customer, or if you turn your center line and focus it out of the window? You're welcome to experiment to find out what it feels like on the receiving end. Because obviously, if we're talking about attention, you won't be able to pay as much attention to the person if you turn your center line away from them. And obviously, the quality of your customer service will be different. I'm not going to say it's going to be worse or better. There's going to be some difference. And I invite you to find out which way you resonate with. I don't know, maybe talking to the customer like this is going to work better for you for some reason. Maybe you're a taxi cab driver. You can't turn your center line to face your customer. So instead of squaring off, you will have to come up with some alternative way. Now, how about another person's projection of energy? For example, if you're in a business meeting, or let's say you're talking to a boss, and the boss is trying to boss you around. You don't want to be constantly bombarded with that person's energy. So what do? You simply move slightly away from the center line. What will that do? You will no longer going to receive the focused energy projection directed at you. You will be slightly off. And of course, the further away you move from your boss's center line, the less control the boss will have over you. It also means that they may not receive your information as clearly because they can't focus their attention on you as well. But that doesn't mean that you cannot focus on them. As a matter of fact, you may find a certain degree of parity in your energies if the energy of the boss is really coming strong, or perhaps you're in a customer service situation where the customer is not happy and perhaps throwing energy daggers at you. You don't need to stand on the center line necessarily. If you just shift a little bit, but continue your focusing on their center line, that will provide you the ability to concentrate your attention and your energy on them without being subjected to their energy projection. Now, how smart is that? You literally remove yourself from the position of a target. You no longer stand there or sit there with a target on your forehead. Please shoot me here. Instead, you continue orienting yourself towards them, but you are no longer in harm's way, energetically speaking. It also can work in martial arts and many other circumstances, quite literally. You don't have to be in somebody's harm's way when they are trying to punch you or kick you or do something else, grab you, for instance. What happens when a person is trying to grab you? By and large, they're trying to establish some degree of control over you. Now, if you appreciate freedom, and this is one of your major values, as it happens to be one of mine, you will probably not want to be grabbed and dominated or controlled. And we know that in many situations when people get in physical altercations, they end up grabbing each other and falling down on the ground and grappling. Well, so if a person is trying to grab you, you don't have to stand there. You can move yourself out of their center line. As soon as you move yourself off of the center line, they will have a lot less power in their hands. Even when a person grabs you and you simply move your hand slightly away from the center line, what's going to happen? They will have a lot less power in their hand. The grip won't be as strong, and they will not have as much control over you. As a matter of fact, you may even seize control. As you may see in my video, which is part of the Qi Dao home study course, as well as I describe it the way it works in the fourth chapter of my book, which is dedicated to elbow strikes. You can use awareness of a person's energy projection when they try to grab you. You simply observe where their lagong point is pointing. Lagong point is the point in the middle of the palm, and when they try to grab you, essentially it's as though the beam of energy is coming out of the lagong point. Or you can imagine that there is a thumbtack glued to the center of the person's palm with a sharp point pointing away from the palm at 90 degrees angle. So when they try to grab you, imagine that this sharp point is actually going to prick you. Well, you don't want to bleed when somebody grabs you like that with a thumbtack. So imagine that you are going to move your part of the body in the same direction where that sharp point is pointing. Or if there is no sharp point there, it's just an energy beam. Wherever the energy beam is pointing, you simply move yourself, that part of the body that is subjected to grip, in that direction, which makes it harder to grab, first of all. And secondly, most people, when they move their hand, they don't turn their body. So what happens? The hand moves away from that person's center line. Now, it's up to you whether or not to observe the principle of orientation. So when you're moving your hand, it's up to you whether or not to keep orienting your center line towards your hand. If you do that, you will have power while the person who's trying to grab will not have power. If you do it like this, it's a jerky, isolated start-stop motion that will not provide you the same result. I welcome you to experiment with your practice partner to find out how it works. And also, make sure to trade roles with your practice partner, because that will give that person an opportunity to learn the same principle for themselves in a visceral sense. It's something that they want to embody, not just understand theoretically. Oh yeah, this is a good idea to move the whole body rather than making an isolated motion of the limb. It's not enough to just talk about it. It's crucial to walk the talk. And this is something that Qi Dao is famous for. Virtually everyone who's progressed from the basic through the intermediate and advanced levels of Qi Dao studies become an embodiment of the principles that they learn. Why? Because this is what our practice is really all about. It's not about forms. As you probably figured by now, I don't even teach any forms. I don't even find them necessary. However, I'm not going to talk you out of doing forms if there is another style of Qigong or Tai Chi or some other discipline that you may study alongside with Qi Dao, where there are forms. Sure, knock yourself out. Do some forms. But I wonder if you can inform yourself to observe these principles within those forms. Now, this may require some adjustment of the way that you do those forms. And sometimes people are afraid of making any adjustments because they think these forms are perfect just the way they are. Well, believe me, a lot gets lost in translation. A lot probably got lost from the person who created this form to the next generation of the students, to the next generation, to the next generation. And even when the person created the form, when they started developing this form, it was fuzzy. It was not obvious to them how this form was supposed to be. It's not like this form was just given to them by God and they were told, do this form, and if you deviate from it, you go to hell. Obviously, people dreamt up these forms first in a rather obscure way. Perhaps it was not very clear to them how this form was supposed to be, and then they clarified it a little bit for themselves, and then it became a little bit more effective. Perhaps they made some changes to make it even more effective. Obviously, they were creating this form step by step. Does it mean that once the form is released to the public, the process of creation stops? No. This would make it a dead art. Anybody who practices the energy arts seem to want to practice living arts, not the dead arts. What's the difference? The living arts continue evolving. The forms continue developing to greater degree of refinement. And sometimes that also means letting go of some elements or some details that don't prove to be very effective. So, one of the examples of this is the same practice, the same principle of orientation. In Tai Chi forms, for example, brush the knee is a maneuver where a lot of Tai Chi teachers tell their students, your tip of the thumb of the pushing hand needs to be on your center line. Now, why? Have they ever tried and compared? Because if you try and compare, you will find out that bringing the tip of your thumb to the center line will make the tip of the thumb powerful. But it's not the part of the body that you actually transmit energy with. It's the long point of your hand, the point in the middle of the palm, that you use to transmit energy. That's the major energy gateway, one of several major gateways in the body. This is excellent gateway for energy projection. So I wonder if you compare what it's like to try pushing something or someone, say your practice partner, with a hand located on your center line or slightly off, so that the tip of your thumb is in the center line. Or sometimes people say, make it so that it's in front of your shoulder, or make it so that it would be in front of your hip, or a variety of other ideas. Now, I don't want to say these are bad ideas or good ideas. Let's say some people may resonate with them. Some people may not resonate with them. How about you? Which way do you resonate with? Which way works best for you? If you compare the results of a push done with a hand on the center line as opposed to a hand where the tip of the thumb is on center line and the palm is off center line, I'm pretty certain that you're going to get different results. The results is what really going to prove or disprove to you whether or not this principle of orientation works. Now, this is not the only principle. Obviously, there are quite a few others. What are they? Well, I encourage you to read the book included in the home study course. If you have this in the digital format, obviously this is an ebook. Watch the video or the DVD if you have the materials in the physical form. And of course, if you have the physical product in your hands and you would like to have them available to you, for example, as an ebook, well, just send me an email. I will provide you free version of the digital home study course so that you can enjoy it in your iPad or some other tablet or another device that you can use as an ebook reader. And also you can watch videos on any of these devices. You can also listen to the meditation CD or audiobook. So essentially, all of these materials can be experienced and enjoyed either in the physical or in the digital format nowadays. Now, what else I'm going to mention to you today is another principle. It's not about using the body to push. It's about the opposite action, pulling, what most people consider an important part of their practice. They call it stretching. And by definition, stretching is the action that pulls the muscle so that you increase the distance between the origin and insertion of the muscle. Now, if you're not familiar with your muscles, well, that's definitely something I would encourage you to study, and I'm happy to help you with that if necessary. I'm very familiar with anatomy and physiology of the human body, and I used to teach at the East-West College of Healing Arts and other massage schools. So what I would like to do is to offer you an idea about improvement of flexibility without stretching. I recently taught a webinar on this subject matter, and I will be happy to offer you an opportunity to go through the whole series of webinars on some of the refined aspects of our studies. So, what is the principle that we use in place of stretching? It's called lengthen. What's the difference? Well, first of all, we understand that stretching causes stretch reflex. And the reason why stretch reflex happens is because when you stretch the muscle longer than it feels comfortable. So in other words, you stretch beyond the edge of the comfort zone, which is essentially the definition of stretching. If you stretch within the comfort zone, you're just moving within your range of motion. But if you start stretching beyond the edge of your comfort zone, then the muscle starts sending signals to the central nervous system. Alarm, I'm being stretched. I'm being under duress, or I may get torn. So what does central nervous system do? It sends the signal to contract to this muscle, which is exactly what we call stretch reflex. The muscle actually becomes shorter because it starts resisting the possible tearing, and that leads to the opposite result from what we expect or hope to achieve. If we hope to achieve lengthening, we end up, if we start stretching and we hope to become more flexible, instead of that, we actually end up less flexible because the muscle becomes shorter or more tense. Wow, what a paradox. It actually explains thoroughly why so many people end up with really uncomfortable physical conditions when they stretch, or simply they can't become flexible by stretching. So what do I propose instead? First of all, observing the edges of our comfort zone, becoming mindful of the edges of the comfort zone, so that we don't push ourselves beyond these edges so easily. The reason why most people tend to push themselves over the edge is because majority of people try to stretch because they're motivated by the desire to become more flexible. So they have a dream of becoming more flexible. And most of our dreams and aspirations reside outside of the edges of our comfort zone. So when they feel like there is a dream that they want to achieve and there is this edge of the comfort zone, well, they just simply push themselves over the edge, assuming that this is the way to get to where they want to go. Instead, most people push themselves over the edge, experience discomfort, as the name implies, and then they retreat back to the comfort zone. They run away from pain. They just can't stand it for long enough, or they just simply hurt themselves. Then when they recuperate, they try it again. They again push themselves over the edge, trying to stretch, and then they hurt themselves, or they just simply cause themselves a stretch reflex. So the next day or two, they feel like their muscles are really tight and decrepit. Well, if you keep doing the same thing and expect different results, that's what we call insanity, isn't it? What's the alternative? The alternative is to shorten your muscles first. If you shorten your muscle, you will not trigger any alarm. As a matter of fact, the muscle will report to the central nervous system, mission success. I've achieved what I've been trying to achieve for a long time. I've been holding tension or trying to shorten because I was trying to bring these two ends of the muscle closer together. And finally, I've been allowed to manifest this dream. So in other words, we work with the body instead of working against the body. Instead of trying to stretch the muscle, thinking that the stupid muscle is just tense and stiff. It's tense and stiff because central nervous system is busy sending signals of contraction to the muscle. The muscles don't just contract on their own. They need to receive signals from central nervous system telling them to contract. So instead of fighting against the natural process that occurs in our body, we learn how to do it in accord with the natural method of how the body works. So we shorten the muscles first. When we do that, the central nervous system receives no signal of alarm. As a matter of fact, it receives the signal from muscle that it achieved whatever it was trying to achieve. So the central nervous system stops sending signals of contraction to this muscle. As a result, what happens? The muscle becomes more relaxed. when the muscle becomes more relaxed, it doesn't receive signals of contraction, what happens? It naturally starts lengthening. The relaxed muscle lengthens much easier than tense muscle. Makes sense, right? Now, your task now is not to pull beyond the edges of the comfort zone. When you start lengthening, or you start experiencing how your muscle is lengthened after having contracted first, make sure that you observe the principle of mindfulness of the edges of your comfort zone, so you don't push yourself over the edge. You get to the edge and start exploring what it's like to be on the edge. As you explore, you will notice a few interesting things. First of all, that it's not as scary to be on the edge and move along the edge rather than perpendicular to the edge when you push yourself over or run away from pain. Moving along the edge also changes the culture of movement. You're no longer moving in a start-stop linear motion, going against the flow and then fighting against the pain that you experience and then running away from pain. Instead, you start moving along the edge, and that's where the flow usually goes. What happens when your flow takes you for a ride? It usually takes you for a ride along the edge of the comfort zone. When you start exploring the ability to move along the edge, you actually discover that it's much more pleasant. And you may discover that there is a sense of flow, which means you can relax into this motion. And this motion will take you for a ride without you necessarily orchestrating how it's going to unfold. Well, that's what we call going with the flow. When you go with the flow like this, you can experience the most profound sense of wellness and well-being. And the beautiful thing about it is that the longer you enjoy the ride, the longer you enjoy the process of exploring the edges of your comfort zone, the more you get used to being on the edge. The more you expand your comfort zone organically, just by default. And when that happens, your comfort zone becomes broader. Then you can get to the areas that used to be beyond the edges of your comfort zone. Eventually, getting to the area that used to be that dream that you wanted to manifest. You get to it not by going straight for it, but rather by exploring the edges of the comfort zone and eroding these edges, so that eventually that which used to be outside of your comfort zone happens to be within. So you simply are not as uncomfortable being there. Now, this is not something that can be applied only to increasing our flexibility. It can be applied to a variety of different things in our daily lives, or in a particular area of life in which you have a dream that you would like to manifest. So I often consider our practice of physical movement and physical flexibility exploration also a metaphor, an embodiment of the principles that you can apply to other areas of your life, so that you become much more in the flow no matter where you go. Whether it's business, or it's intimate relationships, or it's working with your own health, or helping other people heal. It doesn't matter what you do, the same principles can be applied. And when you apply these principles, you get different results. So I invite you to share your results with me. And also, I would like to help you achieve greater results. To share your results, feel free to email me at tantrapa@gmail.com and let me know what your results are, what the results might be that you would like to experience. So in other words, if you're not getting the results that you want to achieve, feel free to let me know. I will be happy to help you with that. How will I help you? Well, there are two things that I would like to offer to you. I was actually going to offer only one, but I decided to offer you two. One thing is an opportunity to attend a live workshop. A workshop that will be happening in Portland, Oregon. And you are welcome to attend it for the entire weekend of July, of the second weekend of July. It's going to be July 11th and 12th. July 11th and 12th is going to be a workshop during which you will be able to explore and experience for yourself all these practices that I mentioned today and many, many more. We will cover pretty much every single practice that you can find in the Qi Dao home study course. And in addition to that, I will also initiate you into the practice of empowerment. The practice of empowerment is a unique Qi Dao practice specifically designed and dedicated to learning how to be in flow, how to feel the flow of Qi in your body and around it, and allow yourself to surrender to the flow. Now, there are other practices in our intermediate, advanced levels of Qi Dao and beyond that are based on the practice of empowerment. So I often refer to it as the cornerstone of more advanced Qi Dao practices. The reason why I consider it so important is also because it's specifically designed to facilitate Qigong state. Remember, in the beginning of our webinar today, we talked about how Qigong state is very important for most Qigong practices. But this one is the practice that doesn't just rely on you being in Qigong state. It actually gets you into that state. So much so that any other practices that you do after practicing empowerment, you will be able to benefit from a lot more because you will be in Qigong state. Now, this is something that I only offer to people who meet with me face-to-face, either attending the workshops or working with me one-on-one. So the first option is to attend the workshop. And as I said, it's going to be happening in Portland, Oregon, or to be precise, in Beaverton, which is a suburb of Portland, in my dojo, on the second weekend of July. Once again, it's going to be July 11th and 12th, after Independence Day weekend. And if you prefer to work with me one-on-one, I also have another opportunity for you. You are welcome to request a complimentary Qigong coaching session. That's right. I'm going to give you a free session that I normally charge $250 for. And as a matter of fact, I don't offer my sessions on a one-off basis. I normally set up a program that the person would go through either for 3 months, 6 months, or a whole year. This is a Qigong coaching program that I charge a lot more than $250 for, as you can imagine. However, for you, as long as you take advantage of my offer before the end of May of 2015, it will be absolutely free of charge. And as I also mentioned, I think in my email to you, there is a way to attend this workshop, also free of charge. The regular charge for this workshop is also going to be $250 for the whole weekend. It's pretty inexpensive for a weekend workshop, as a matter of fact. But if you decide to join the certification program that will be starting in July as well, soon after the workshop, we'll be starting the certification program. If you decide that you would like to join the certification program, then I will comp your tuition for the workshop entirely. So it will be absolutely free event for you. Now, there's no pressure. You are welcome to just sign up for a free consultation, free coaching session with me. And I don't expect that you will sign up for a workshop or you will register for the certification program that will be following it in July. If you want to, of course, you will be welcome to, but I will be just genuinely happy to help you with your practice. And also, I will be delighted to see you in July for our weekend workshop, exclusively offered to the people who own Qi Dao home study courses. So there are only several hundred people worldwide who currently own these courses, so it's going to be a pretty exclusive event. We will keep the number of people attending this event to 20. That's right. Out of several hundred people who own courses, only 20 people will be able to attend because of the limitations of space. It's a nice, spacious dojo, but I still want to make sure that we have plenty of space for everyone. So we make sure that only 20 people can attend this event. And of course, it's going to be sold out. We often have full house. And if you want to participate in this event, please go to qigongcoaching.com/events and register for that event. And to take advantage of my offer of the consultation that I will offer you free of charge, a whole hour Qigong coaching session, please go to qigongcoaching.com/gift. qigongcoaching.com/gift. I spelled Qigong as Qigong. You can also find my website by typing Qigong in a variety of other ways, but this particular link is qigongcoaching.com/gift. I look forward to working with you and to seeing you in our coming up workshop. Until then, have a wonderful time. Namaste.